Product to be serious about product compliance. That's the new slogan, which will be effective on our new website as well, which will launch soon. Keep you posted on that. Of course, you are all serious about product compliance. Today, another Tuesday, another Compliance Tuesday. EU chemical legislation. What's brewing? There's a lot going on, and it's impossible to train you all to all dots and I's on everything that's been written. That's not the purpose of today. Purpose is to give you an idea what's actually in between the lines and how to deal with that in general. So I hope you all recognize this because it's quite common. I think you probably have used it in the last 12 months, once or twice, and it's actually aspirin. So you can see how something very odd drawing formula is actually something quite common. Aspirin. What's aspirin for your compliance headaches? I hope it's product IP, obviously, because compliance headaches we all have, and the thing is how to get rid of them. So welcome this Compliance Tuesday about chemicals. Well, in general, compliance is about recognizing patterns, recognizing certain risk. I would say when you are at this end, the European end of the supply chain, buying products, it's really about managing the performance of those making products. If you are on the other side of the supply chain making products, it's actually about demonstrating that you are in control to those that want to buy your products, that you have, recognize what's happening in Brussels. It's relevant for both sides. And for chemical risks, it's not different than for mechanical risk or electronic risk. Although we might feel a little bit different because it seems so, not abstract. You cannot see it. It's all kind of like the aspirin schematic, difficult language. So we're going to myth bust a little bit of that because it only works if you know what you're really looking at. And let us decode that today for you. So if you haven't joined the Mentimeter yet, but most of you have, then you can still go to menti.com and use the code and put the link on that. So what kind of emotions do I trigger when I show you the word reach? Be a good start of this session. Stress, headaches, aspirin. Yeah, I can recognize those words. I think they are different than what I would say when it's, for example, when I show you the word low voltage directive, or when I show you the word, oh, maybe it's the same for electromagnetic compatibility, but the need for coffee, that's a good one. It is interesting because I want you to remember these words in the context of how you try to solve aspects around reach. Because for somebody somewhere along the line of manufacturing products, answering questions around reach is actually not complex. And it's a very specific topic, substances and chemicals and recipes of materials. It's very specific. So to try to figure out what is in something when everything is already mixed and processed and returned into a housing of a product or housing of an adapter, to reverse engineer that and to figure out if any substances is in there is actually complex, takes different processes to sample different kind of materials, to extract different kind of chemicals. So it's not like putting everything in a chemical blender and then voila, all comes out. But somewhere along the line, somebody was producing something that resulted in this product. And the ones that are producing that raw material, they actually know what is in there because it's part of them selling a part, selling a granulate for making plastic casings, or a substances that cleans something, or substances that add a feature as simple as color to something. Yeah. So I totally dig those words that you have here. The question is, are these words related to the fact that we try to solve things but actually hold the wrong end of the stick? So that's what I call about debugging. Why is Rich getting us all irritated? Perhaps we are allergic to chemicals, or even worse, because the reason why we have regulated all chemicals and substances is because we want to prevent that they influence us. If the word already irritates us, what about the stuff that things are made of? So it could be triggering allergic reactions. It could actually alter DNA. It could do that directly. It could do that indirectly. It could do directly, instantly, or via long-term accumulating substances in our body until a certain threshold is reached. A nickel allergic, for example. So we are subjected to chemicals our entire life, and God forbid that we become very, very old. I wish you all a healthy, long life. But the longer we live, the longer we are exposed to chemicals. So the thresholds of chemicals are often the ones for debate. Why does it matter? We just sell a few of these items, and it's just a little bit over the limit. Why does this single thing matters? It's very simple. We are subjected to chemicals our entire life, and me including, we like to consume and buy products, and we are surrounded by chemicals. So there's no other way for regulators than to just limit what we are subjected to. The chemical legislation in Europe is managed by ECHA, the European Chemical Agency, and it's located in Finland. It does a number of things. Obviously, it takes care of the overall agenda on REACH and registration and authorization of chemical substances. It handles restrictions, what is actually completely forbidden or only to be used in a certain context and a certain threshold. It also keeps a list of what you all know as the SVHCs, the substances of very high concern. These are the ones that are likely going to be restricted very soon. And we already want to know, we as a society, how much of certain substances is where located in certain products. Because the only thing, when we want to replace certain chemicals or substances with others that are less harmful, we need first to identify what is the biggest triggers in mass and who is involved. So a lot of the registration in REACH is actually to be able to pinpoint and identify substances and entities that are related to these substances. And with that, we can actually, ECHA, invite people and say, listen, we understand the function of these substances and we appreciate that they are there. However, there are certain harmful effects. Is the industry actually already working on alternatives, and what kind of period is needed to actually substitute things? That's also why you see very different transition periods for certain substances, because sometimes it just takes a very long time to adjust, right? If substances of very high concern are over 0.1%, you need to notify these at the database called SCIP. Before, it was only a business-to-business notification. I sell products to you, and you sell them to consumers, so I need to tell you that it's something over 0.1% inside. Then it changed it into SCIP notifications. And next, coming years, you will see that these notifications actually are part of the digital product passport, which means that you cannot delay notifications because they need to be there when products are on the market. They need to be accurate. You need to be pinpointing where they are, which needs to be measured. And again, if you want to base your business model to collect data, for example, on SCIP notifications by testing complete products when they're already made, because nobody tells you what's inside, I would say this business is gone. Sell it tomorrow because it's no way you're going to make money, except if you are a laboratory, of course. ECHA is also responsible for dealing with the what's called the union list. That's an approved substances list of plastics and plastics adaptives used for food contact materials. If you want to use any of those materials, if you want to make food contact materials from plastics, you must use substances that are on the union list. Must use. So I really don't understand why people are burning money asking laboratories to identify which materials are in food contact materials when they are made. When it's required to choose from a list, they should tell you what's list. Yeah. So the thing that you do there tells the authorities that you actually are not in control. So that's odd. They also deal with biocides. They also deal with legislation about markings on substances business to business, safety data sheets, but also logos, but also how risks translate into instructions and risk on packaging of products and more. ECHA, they also have very interesting videos. So it's not just chemical stuff. Like this aspirin, that's an easy word, aspirin. This chemical drawing was not so easy. What if you and I need to discuss certain substances and we talk about complex words? What if we could replace that with a common language? And that's what the CAS number is about. It's a chemical abstract service number. Every substance has one unique CAS number. There's even also there's a worldwide system and there's a European system, but the CAS number is easy to do. Without a CAS number, we actually, what you can say, there's no conversation because we are not discussing the same. And there can be small variations in a group of substances with tiny different effects, but they all have a CAS number. So the CAS numbers is what you see not in a bit of material, because a bit of material will link to we have used this kind of plastic pellet or another substance, and in that material, that's called a bill of substances, that recipe specification uses CAS numbers. And if people say, but my vendor doesn't want to give away his recipe, fine. If he doesn't want to say how much of each CAS number is in the recipe, I would still like to know which CAS numbers are used in the recipe. Yeah. They're also mentioned on safety data sheets. And the safety data sheets also have a common format because the risk of chemicals is not depending on where you live. It's the same. And it's great that they do that because otherwise, during transport from products across countries or economic regions, you need to change the format of information. So that's what the chemical industry at least did, make it a common, harmonized style of communication. It's also the CAS number, something that you want to use in product IP smart forms, verify smart forms, or when you are talking about supplier queries. Hey, I have a question about, or can you identify this with a CAS number? Yeah. If you know the CAS, you really know what you're asking for. That's the granular level of detail when you want to discuss chemicals and chemical risk. You can use the CAS number on ECHA to actually do a query, and it will give you very clear common language information about these substances, where it's commonly used for, what kind of transition risks are there. Is it with skin contact? Is it by breathing in, etc., etc. So it's really very important that you know it on that level. CLP and SES is more like the alphabet of chemical communication. So CLP, classification, labeling, and packaging, those specialists call it CLP. They like all this kind of shortcuts. It's very relevant because, again, if you supply detergents business to business, you need a safety data sheet because the one that has the warehouse wants to know with substances, something that can be released from a product like detergents, oil, even materials in batteries. If you have a warehouse, you have a license to store certain goods, you have flammability classes, etc., etc. And on the safety data sheet, there's actually information for your warehouse manager to to indicate how to store things. If you're in the manufacturing side, so you're producing things, it actually have instructions for how to protect the workers when dealing with, I don't know, certain ASO dyes or blue dye for filling ink in ballpoints. So not having a safety data sheet means that factories cannot take care of safety for their staff, and they cannot take care of safety for the warehouse. Ditto, same for you. So safety data sheet actually should always be there. If it's not there, it's a flag raised. The safety data sheet is not something that you and I as a consumer see, but it mentioned if certain substances can be released of a product where during use, which P and H phrases need to be on consumer packaging / website. Those phrases, those P and H phrases, are actually completely prescribed. So it's like a big, very big book with P and number X in all languages. Don't AI translate an English warning into any other language, because that means that you really don't understand the alphabet of chemical communication. It's not something that you should invent. It's something that you should actually use. Yeah? No marketing creativity allowed. What about font sizes, etc.? Well, that's all mentioned in CLP classification, but I can tell you, follow the phrases is the first one. Make sure it's readable is the next one. And yes, for certain volumes there are minimum sizes. But if you are the problem owner for that part of the product marketing or product marking, that should not be difficult. You don't need to be a chemist to identify the font size. Got my meaning, right? So if you sell to consumers, you're playing in a regulated zone, and actually the information is all available. It's like a telephone book, if you still know what a telephone book was. A lot of your initial wording about chemicals is, it's so difficult to identify chemicals. But actually, I learned as well from my dear colleague René that most of the features of a product, and he is true, is not by shape, but is about chemicals. You can say, oh, even for a knife is sharp because we made it a sharp edge. Well, if that material wasn't a hardened kind of steel, that sharp edge would become very, very quickly. So you can actually read chemicals by looking at products and product specification. Very bright yellow, the product by itself is flexible or is durable. Flame resistance, water repellent, easy to clean. It's for outdoor. It's UV stable. Sunglasses, scratch resistance. It's anti-static. It is protected biocides for wood or polymers. If somebody writes a feature of a product, a functionality of a product, you can actually ask, how is this achieved? By adding what did you achieve that? And then you go into the level of chemicals. And we find it quite common that certain chemicals or certain features are there, but they don't come from shape. We all quickly run into chemicals, especially when you are dealing with food contact materials. But if you're in toys or cosmetics, there are even forbidden to use carcinogenic, mutagenic, or toxic for reproduction substances, CMRs. And it's one of those aspects that you will find when you type in a CAS number in ECHA, if this product substance is listed as C, M, or R. In that case, you should not use it in a toy or in cosmetics. It's interesting because by using the REACH/ECHA catalog on this aspect, they don't need to update toys or cosmetic legislation every time we discover that a certain substance has actually this kind of a risk. Yeah. So they should not be CMRs in toys and cosmetics. It's also forbidden to use POPs, actually, since 1996. POPs is not a group of a specific family of substances. It's substances that have one specific aspect and that is that it's very persistent in the environment. It takes a long, long time for sunlight and weather to get rid of this, and because it takes a long time, maybe 100,000 years, they are everywhere, and they are also in you. I can tell you that. Some of the restrictions are actually based to recycling. If we prevent the use of certain substances in electronic materials or in packaging, then we can actually reuse those materials. If we add a large level of certain substances, like we used to have lead in ink on newspapers, that made those newspapers not available for reuse anymore, not in this modern age. So we want to restrict substances in raw materials so we can actually increase our circular economy, ROHS, or packaging legislation. Thresholds for new and reused materials we also need to have. We want people to use a certain amount of material that's actually already been used before. It's also chemical legislation. There are preservative biocides. I have a nice example of that. They are everywhere. If they wouldn't be anywhere, everywhere in your world, then your world would be really, really different. And there are substances that function. Lubricants, detergents. So what if your company or your brand would actually ban all CMRs? That could be. There are different people, different companies that say, okay, I know that CMRs are banned to be used in toys and cosmetics, but we want actually to ban them everywhere. And it's possible because there are always alternative. Would you be in favor of that, of such a policy? Somebody's asking, cost number is just for a substance, right? Not for a vendor related. Correct. It's not vendor related. It's there can be an owner. The first one that has a new substances and starts a file could be the owner of the cost number in that sense. But cost numbers are public. It's not owned by somebody in that sense. Don't think it applies. It's not about apply. It's about policy. Higher cost? Really? Really? I think it's the good word is positive move. Exactly. So if it's possible to replace a CMR substance, why wouldn't you have it as a policy to promote that change? Yeah, it's necessary for toys and cosmetics. What if you need to highlight CMRs in a digital product passport so that anyone that buys a product can actually see that the product that you are making has a CMR substance? So isn't it odd that we want to have legislation or want that we are facing legislation that drives such a kind of a positive move, right? All right. If you look at this, skip, these are sliders. We don't, yes, we do. Is there anybody responsible for skip or SDS content, CLP labeling, and information about hazardous substances online and packaging? If it's not applicable, if one of these lines is not applicable for you, then please don't vote on that one. So only vote when it's relevant for you. Some of you don't have anything with a safety data sheet. Yeah. But somewhere in the supply chain, somebody will have a safety data sheet. So don't be afraid to vote. What's skip? It's a good question. Well, if substances of very high concern are in a product over 0.1%, you must notify ECHA in which part of the product is how much of that substances. And I can tell you, if you are in electronic devices, chances are very high that you have to make a notification, because there's a number of parts that actually will have substance of very high concern over 0.1%. So that's still allowed, but you need to notify. Because again, by notifying, we as a society, we will be able to identify where's actually the first next substances that we should look into a replacement together with the industry, the chemical industry. Okay. So I would expect, because you all have products, 99% have products. So if it's relevant, that skip should be actually at a 10, close to 10. Because the fact that you are responsible for skip doesn't mean that you need to do skip notifications. It's not the same, right? Okay. Let's go to the next one. Because if no one owns this kind of problem, actually no one is managing this risk, right? And yeah, that's a one-liner, but it still is true. I mentioned already the union list. It's for plastics, rubber, and silicon are not plastics. Don't forget that. One shall only use substances that are on the union list. So that's already something where, if you are in food contact material of plastics, you have to know which cast numbers are in that product. That's also one of the reasons why the manufacturer has to have good manufacturing practice, because that means he will be forced from his quality system to document which substances are used for which batch produced for who. So this is a question that should be easy to be answered. So why isn't it easy to be answered? What we often see in test reports is really, and I cannot blame test institutes, because if you ask them to test this yellow that is in this jar for this and this legislation, they will simply do it. It's not their job to be efficient in managing product compliance. But if you tested this yellow and it is okay, what actually is the value? Because I was in a DIY store yesterday, and God knows how many jars of yellow were there. Yeah. If you don't know what the yellow actually is, what is it made out of, then I would call it's a theater. It's really a waste of money, because you can even not reproduce it. Yes, the next product that was produced also looks yellow. It's really burning money. Yeah. And I don't think that you are in the business of burning money. So I give you another example, and it is relevant not just for chemical legislation. I want you to remember the other sessions that we did. You really need to tier your tiers, your suppliers and vendors out each other, and start to build supplier trees in order to get the right questions, right answers to the right questions, but also to be able to do supply chain due diligence. So how many companies are involved in making this? I think in your traditional compliance approach, you would say, well, we buy this from Acme A. Mr. Chen in Shanghai makes this all. Really? He makes the full contact material blades, he makes the adapter, he makes the cable, the connector, he even makes the battery, he makes the casing, the switch, the printed circuit board. He makes it all? Yeah, because we got a bit of material and it says he makes it all. Come on. Somebody is probably making the electronics circuit board and he buys that as a part. And somebody is making switches, so he buys switches. He might do plastic injection on the housing, but he's definitely not making the plastic granulate that is used to make the housing. probably the one that makes the housings. He's not probably making the food contact knives on that. He is not making the adapter. And the one that makes the adapter probably is not even making the cable, the connector. The one that makes the cable buys the connector. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I'm not even talking about packaging materials. Yeah. So it starts with bill of material because the bill of material will show all those parts. And what we see is there's actually a lot of non-formation. I call it non-fo. We need to move from non-fo to info. We see things on a bill of material. First of all, we see something that is 100% PVC or 100% PPE. Really? 100%? Okay. How come it has color? Or how come it actually is soft, or actually it's not soft, or actually it's flame retardant? Yeah, there's no such thing as 100% PVC unless somebody makes granulate, small pellets that somebody is putting into a machine and use that to mold a housing. Well, and you see a bit of material where it's all made by Mr. Chen in Shanghai. All the battery, the knives, the cable. Really, he's making it all. It's like the apple pie manufacturer that we use in our risk assessment training. And the guy makes the dough and he makes also the apples. It's interesting. It's impossible. It's not like that. And we know it's not like that, but we accept this level of non-formation. So we're wasting time and money. We're burning, even using Pro-ATP, you are burning valuable time and money collecting information that actually is non-formation. Yeah? You really want to know all these vendors because only these vendors are able to answer these questions. Yeah. Either or the one that makes that product for you is collecting it all by themselves, or in certain situations, you say, I want to contact them directly. In fact, you could have a policy where you say, I don't want to go 3 tier deep because then I want to communicate myself directly and even identify how much of this vendor stuff is ending up in other products. And cables is one of the examples that I often use. You all have a lot of product with USB cables to charge, and you always use, most of you always use the cable provided by the one that makes the product for you. How many kilometers of cable are you buying from vendors that you don't know, where the one that makes the end product actually is not capable of, not qualified to maintain or monitor the specifications and compliance of that cable? So why you not mandate that you know who is that buying, making that cable, maybe asking for a copy of the order? Why you're not looking for a cable manufacturer? Same with the adapter. Or the answer is, we don't have any technical specification. Oh, really? You just walk up to the factory in the morning and just start to make a product for us with whatever is there. So the production is a lucky draw. Well, that makes my day. Don't accept this non-formation and actually confront people with this. And if they are not the ones that are ready to answer, go for the one that needs to answer this. Yeah. If you're communicating with one who's in sales department or it's a trader, then the trader who has tremendous added value for your business need to step up his effort and either allows you to communicate one-to-one, then we will call the trader tier 0, one-to-one with tier 1 to deep dive. And you don't need to study chemistry to find something about non-formation. It's just plain logic. Well, yeah, it's if you never looked into this, it takes time to change. But you have to change because you need this information. You need to have the information, right? So don't call them our factories, what you always do. It's our factory. It's not your factory. It's their factory. If it's your factory, it would be easy because you would actually open up the hard drive and look for the information and also make decisions on procurement. It's not your factory. They are the factory. They assemble. The thing is, you own the market access risk at the European cost of when something is wrong, not at a manufacturing cost when something goes wrong. And that's a big difference. Yeah. And if the legislation is changing where actually you have to have information about chemicals with the digital product passport before you ship it, then you cannot solve missing links anymore. So one of the things that it's very easy, it's the 5 questions principle. If you're not happy with the answer you give, ask at least 5 times why or how and go in depth. You may ask go 10 times in depth, but again, it's like this advertisement, like daddy bought a new truck. Why? Because we need more space. Why? Because we need to transport more goods. Why? Because the business is growing. Why? It's the 5 times why or who or what. Yeah. And these questions have nothing to do with chemical legislation. It's just by not accepting non-formation. Why does this product have this property? Because we have added substance X. Did you add it? No. Okay, who added it? Well, actually, it was part of the granulate that we bought. From who? I don't know. Who knows? What do you mean? Who knows in the company who it is? My colleague. Okay, ask your colleague. Do you have a data sheet? No. Why not? We didn't ask for it. Will you ask for it? And so on and so forth. And the thing is, these things repeat and change something in your supply chain for the next one. They will start to become prepared. If you never ask these questions, there will be resistance, yeah, because it seems to have worked. But they know this information because it's not just a lucky draw to make a product. They never realized it was important for you and for them to share this information with you, all right? So be persistent on this and give it time, but don't walk away from this task. This is fundamental. Knowing more about the details of the bill of material will also help you to monitor product compliance on many other legislation parts than just the chemical ones, because it forces the supply chain to become disciplined and structured. Yeah. I think some of you might know what is one of the dirtiest places in the office. Gives me time to. Just sip a glass of water. It's interesting that some of you are actually touching it while typing it. Indeed, keyboard. So what were you thinking when you were typing keyboard using the keyboard? Mm-hmm. The colleague's desk. Good one. Yeah. So actually, of course, there's a lot of bacteria and fungi everywhere. But what is it? What is it? Why doesn't it cause effect? Keyboards are indeed notorious. Coffee machines. The sales department. All right, that's a classic. Let's put that one on the big on the wall. It's actually not the toilet seat or not the coffee machine. It's actually indeed the keyboard. And research showed that it could have up to 400 times more bacteria than toilet seats. I hope not. The thing is that, in fact, because we know we touch keyboards a lot and we know, you have your breadcrumbs over it and maybe somebody spilled coffee and somebody of us went to the toilet, didn't wash their hands and then used it. Because we know things like toilet seats or keyboards are prone to have a lot of bacteria. And this is what you can call anticipated use and foreseeable misuse, not washing hands. So what happens is, why is nothing growing on my keyboard? Because manufacturers add biocides to the plastics already. So it protects the plastic, but it also protects you. However, this means that you need to manage the risk of the biocide, because biocides are a heavy regulated group of substances. In fact, it has its own legislation, 528/212. And there can be two things. You can sell products and say, It's antibacterial, it kills 99.99% of the bacteria. These kind of claims, or anti-mosquito, anti-something. If you sell a product with such a claim, it's called a treated article, and the substance must be approved and listed at ECHA, so you cannot just use one, approved for that purpose, and you need to mention the active substance used on packaging, on website. So you need to substantiate your claim. Some use the kill 99% or bacteria free on apparel, where actually they say it can be washed at high temperatures, which is not the claim. So don't use these kind of claims. What about a keyboard if it's just regular use? In fact, preservatives or biocides are everywhere. They are in mice, laptop chassis, touchscreens, headsets, cables. They are actually everywhere. And they prevent material degradation, they prevent odor development, mold grow. So if biocides are in most of the plastic products and you are putting them on the EU market, you are legally required to know which biocides are in there, and they must be BPR authorized, even though you are not claiming the usage of that via treated articles. So you should not use, your vendor should not use biocides that are not BPR authorized. How do you know that it's in there? Because it's somewhere in the plastic. So the one that makes the plastic casing, or the one that made the keyboard switches, he's just buying a granulate with a certain recipe. And in that recipe that has a bit of substances are cost numbers of certain chemicals, and some of them are a preservative or a biocide. And if that one is not BPR authorized, that cost number should not be used. Now is the question, do you need to go into this level of detail, or does your vendor need to go in that level of detail? Ultimo, of course, your vendor needs to do that and tell you, look what we have used. We've checked it ourselves, and in fact, it's BPR authorized. Thank you very much, vendor. That saves me a lot of headache. That is your dot on the horizon. And if you put that dot on the horizon, like a Kimberly Boss riding down the first downhill for the next Olympic championships, the date and the time, if you put that dot on the horizon a little bit far away as a goal, that will guide you towards your actions. But that is what you want. Yeah, that's what you aim for when you are managing compliance, proactivity. So again, when was the last time you checked for biocides in products? And if you are making antibacterial claims, treated articles, did you check for that? So the question 2 and 3 is just for those that use treated articles. And most of you have plastics. So actually the first line for all of you should be actually close to 10. So you see that asking questions in the supply chain is much, much more relevant than testing a jar of yellow substances at a TIC. And this information about what biocide actually is in the product is not by the one that is assembling, it's by the one that uses plastic pellets, polymers to make a casing of something, a plastic part. And they don't make those pellets by themselves. They buy it from somebody, and the one that buys it makes it according to a recipe. And it has specific features. It could be anti-static for certain packaging material for sensitive electronics. So anti-static is a chemical property. It's not a shape property. So does it mean that ultimo you are ending up with specifications of raw materials used for certain parts? Yes, exactly. And if you then do an audit or a pre-shipment inspection during production, and you don't see bags of those pallets used for production, but you see other ones, then you have to ask, Why are these alternative materials not listed in our file? It is as relevant as an alternative listed switch or an alternative approved cable, but now it's a chemical, it's a raw material. Yeah. And I'm using this biocide because it forces you to deep dive. And I'm not saying that you should stop doing what you do today. I want you to put a dot on the horizon, maybe 12 months, give it in one season or maybe 2 seasons away. I say, at that moment, I want 80% of this covered. I want to know deep dive detail. And also, if I know in the other example who is making the adapter and who is making the cable, I want them to join, the same social compliance scheme that I am forced. Because if you are on 40 BCI kind of programs, it doesn't really matter how many entities you throw into that account. What you pay for is depending on the turnover you have, not on the number of companies that you are listing in your supply chain. So it really opens up complete scale. So I told you already the answer, but who is actually the best one to answer all such detailed information? You or your supplier? And there's a reason why you are outsourcing production, because somebody is a specialist. You are a generalist. You have a broad scope of products. Somebody down in the supply chain, actually, there is somebody that knows all the detailed information because they're making that very product. And it's not just a lottery. They're making it according to a recipe. Yeah. So I'm not saying that the information is not there. It's just never asked for and nobody prepared it to be shareable. Yeah. So if suppliers know more about the product than you, why are you still building the market access files? That was also what we wanted with Project IP. And then we started to think, look at the complexity of what's heading, the regulatory tsunami, where the rhythm needs to go from SKU-based to batch-based, and the granular detail of information is increasing and need to be ready before shipment. We thought we need to enable suppliers to actually make complete files, and we call it file request. So you start the file, but they finish the file, and they need to work with their vendors, and then they share it back for you with review. Now you're managing compliance, performance, and not clean up documents for them. When you know what's in the material, it's just the beginning, because then truly what will open up is who's actually second and nth tier vendors. And then you need to start to imagine about a policy. Larger corporations will say, do I really want to deep dive more than 2 or 3? You see it what the IKEAs of this world are doing. So actually, we don't only want to go 1, 2, and then the number 3, we want to contact again ourselves and make a decision about strategic raw materials. What is basically there. This is not for everybody, but those that are involved and having large quantities probably will deep dive into those supply chain. And then you get dedicated packaging suppliers, the dedicated plastic suppliers or dedicated cable suppliers. And it makes sense because it reduces the level of variations that you need to manage, and therefore it reduces the level of risk that you need to manage. But it requires a different thinking. It's not purchasing thinking, it's procurement thinking, because you think there's more cost involved, but in fact it's not. Imagine if you would change a supplier of this automatic battery operated cake cutting device because it's just 2 cents cheaper, and you will get the whole supply chain tree with this new supplier. What is the real cost if you need to audit them all, if you collect information again? It's a massive. Purchasing say product is cheaper, procurement will say this is a nightmare. Yeah. The cost involved is maybe 2,500 euro a year just to maintain a vendor, even a second tier vendor. If you want to do supply chain audits, social compliance, environmental, carbon footprint, not even considering collecting all the materials on chemical legislation. There's cost involved. Yeah. So those cost numbers actually become interesting. I call them breadcrumbs. Connecting the dots would be the other one. Yeah. There's something in product IP that I wanted to highlight in this aspect, which is called CHAMP, and we have it for a very long time. And many of you probably have wondered what the hell is that, and then try to use it and think, oh, it's far too complex. Yeah, it's true. If you are looking at a complete product, then it doesn't make sense for you to use CHAMP. But if I'm a factory and I want to promote the way I control the quality, also the chemical risk of my product, I would use CHAMP, because with CHAMP, I actually can identify, because of the use of certain products, which risks are already gone by collecting information. So it's actually chemical risk profiling. And if I'm a manufacturer of a certain product or part, I will have the cost of CHAMP, which is a little bit cost involved, for every, not for every order, but for my complete production, and then it vanishes over the quantities. If you want to use CHAMP at the end of the supply chain, it doesn't work. You don't have the expertise, you don't have the information. It's way too expensive and way too elaborate. It's not intended for you. Product IP is a software as a service. We have users of Product IP in every part of the supply chain. This is something for those that make products, not for one that buy products, right? So this turning around of process is something that we connect to Product IP flat rate. Some of the traditional classic enterprise users also are still able to use it, but in general, it's about the volume. Prepaid file requests sending to your first suppliers, they work with their vendors via the traditional document request, or have already started files themselves, being a flat rate customer themselves. There can be factories that actually respond to your file request saying, all right, I already have the file, here it is. How much for saving time and money there? Yeah. Reviewing is actually just 10 or 20% of the work of organizing their chaos in time. 10% of 20% in time. But looking at what they pay per hourly rate and what your cost is per hourly rate, the 10%, 20% saving from making a file is even bigger in terms of money, all right? And of course, when you receive the file back for review, you can do anything with it. You can make your declaration of conformity. You can share it again with your customer. It has the DPP QR code sharing included, etc., etc. Most interesting, the residue of this process is that both you and your first tier supplier have a file that is monitored by us and has a reorder expiry date. So both files become, the requirement list in those files become irrelevant somewhere in time. So now you have created the basis for anticipation. And this is key, because this monitoring, this is a 2023, almost 2024 kind of a overview. Look at what we are monitoring with our expert team that goes into the database. Why are you doing it? Why is your supplier doing it? Stop wasting time. Use the requirement list, right? This is also knowledge as a service. So it's not only software as a service. So you are the generalist, and somewhere in the supply chain there are specialists. And because we start with product, the specialist will know the product. It's for them much more easier to identify what they're doing, because they are always in this kind of category. So their learning cycle of product IP in the context of the product is much shorter than yours. Yeah. And this is really managing change. Changing this process is actually a must, because you will not be able to keep up with the tempo in the future if you still are collecting information and trying to organize it at your end. There's not enough of you working on product compliance to be able to deal with that. You must go into performance review mode. Must. Right. One slide back. Why all this detail matters, I told you. We know more and more about chemicals, the restrictions becoming more and more tough, and the consequences of not keeping the restrictions become more severe. So if you are in the food contact material, over a limit means recall, not just sales stop, recall. But the same goes with transparency. If you don't know what is skip, and if you in the future need to have substances of very high concern listed in a digital product passport, have to be listed. And I can tell you already, there's low-hanging fruit for market surveillance authorities who know that certain products always will have certain substances that should be listed. Yeah. And if you cannot solve this missing information anymore, you need to have a process that shows this information in digital product passport before the product is made and packaged and shipped, because you cannot change it anymore. Yeah. That is the world that you are facing. So you need to really start thinking different, not about chemical legislation, but about the collaboration with your suppliers and the way you collect and review documents. Yeah. And don't forget the review of chemicals or substances is part of the mandatory risk assessment. The new toy legislation is massive, as an example. And I know many of you focus, well, we have CE, we have a declaration of conformity, but most of the chemical legislation is actually, if it's food contact material, it has its own declaration. But everything on the REACH agenda doesn't have a CE regime, and CE has nothing to do with risk assessment. It's a confirmation about the management that for certain legislation, at least they have sufficient budget available to ensure that there is a reasonable level of security around compliance of these aspects. There is no CE quality as such. Okay, it's just a new layer in legislation to be able to basically put pressure on management, right? But the whole REACH agenda is not on CE. Selling a product actually means that you have done your due diligence across the whole scope. Yeah, so forget about declaration of conformity and the relevance and the security it gives. You need to do a risk assessment. You need to collect information. You need to have a process and a structure. And running a spreadsheet and doing Googling and even using ChatGPT to figure things out, that's not a recorded process. It's easy to answer a question today. It's much more complex to answer a question in 3 years. It's even more complex to let somebody else in the supply chain organize things in a singular way that allows you to efficiently review materials. So Product is Product is an exchange standard for this. No digital product passport, no market access. When will it start? Packaging first, batteries first, toys first. Soon, 2026, 2027. Anyway, we'll move to QR codes, replacing EN codes. So it will be soon. You need every day to start managing the change. The good thing is, you don't need to be a chemist to ask the right questions, to have an opinion and know where to start. And so most of you probably are on the left side and say, well, we know that we don't know everything. Stop procrastination, move to the right side, know what you don't know, because only then you can make the right decisions. You cannot change your whole supply chain. There's this golden rules about 20-80, 20% of your products make 80% of your profit, or your business, 80% of your business depend on 20% of the product. The priorities you need to make decisions on by yourself. It's not Product IP that does that. But if you are in a singular way of asking questions, and a singular truth is the requirement is a Product IP, which you can have a maturity model, because not everybody is growing into things at the same rate, but you are at least in control of the discrepancies of what should be there and what's not. And then you make process. But you don't need to manage today. You don't need status quo management. It doesn't make any sense, because Brussels is demanding a complete different granularity in 2 years. So look at product, look at artwork, look at workflow, look at supply chain, and realize that you did a great job yesterday, but it's not good enough for tomorrow. You did a great job yesterday. It brought us to today, but it's not good for solving tomorrow. You need to do things really, really different. Yeah. And maybe pick 1 or 2 products with 1 or 2 suppliers that you would consider to be an early adopter, and where you think you have some influence on with respect to quantities that you purchase, and start to deep dive with them first, so that you learn actually learn how much time it will cost, even with those that you think are capable and are willing. And that gives you also an idea of, will we be able to do that for the rest? If you are in between, if you are importing and doing private label for retail, you have to imagine that retail, their scope is even broader than your scope. So they probably will seek licensing models where they currently have private label models for very complex situations, because they also cannot do this for everything that they want to sell in their stores. So this will shift not only the way you are working together with factories, but also how retail is dealing with branding. So now that you have listening to me, well, almost there, that you're listening to me for 15 minutes, 60 minutes almost. Thank you for that. Do you think you need to be a chemist to make progress? If you are just importing only cosmetics and you market later or detergents, I think you will need to have a chemist in your team, but most of you probably don't have. So I like these answers. These good. They need to be consistency on the left side. You don't need to have, and you don't need to be a chemist to make progress on collecting information. And there are always very, there's always specific knowledge out there. But even if you look at ECHA information on cost numbers, it is very, very clear to read, and it's available in many, many, many languages. The only thing is, without a cost number, you have no idea how to look for it. Or why should you look for it? Your vendor should look for it and understand, is this fit for purpose? Do I need to change? And when they manage change, I need to inform you. So I like this answer. Well done. So if it's all, and I asked this in different ways in the last sessions, if it's all so clear, what is the number one internal factor blocking you to grow your business and taking care of increased legal obligations? So it's not Brussels. Fear of missing out. I think cost is interesting because I'm pretty sure that you are wasting a lot of time and money today on tests and collecting information that is actually non-formation, simply because you didn't have an audit. If you write down cost, let's put it different. If you had to sell your product to a company where I was working, would you still call it cost? I think cost is relative to pressure that you got from the market, and if the information needs to be transparent and openly available to everybody scanning a QR code, then the peer pressure of the complete market will increase. So yesterday's cost and future benefits are not the same as yesterday cost and yesterday's benefit. You need to put things in the context of tomorrow, not in the context of yesterday. The reason why we have this increased legislation today is because we are simply not putting enough attention to this level of detail. Lack of blockchain. I don't think that's an excuse. Retail and trade would like to always be flexible on certain things. And yes, technology will help, but only very, very limited. And cost is not actually an internal factor. It's a result. So the purchase department or the product manager or lack of support, unawareness and manpower and priority. All right. Thanks for that. So new mindset, new results. What you can do already, start mapping your products, assign internal owners for different ones. So don't stick on the traditional, somebody's responsible for reach, somebody is responsible for low voltage directive, somebody responsible for foot contact material. No, somebody is responsible for product features, another one for packaging artwork, horizontally across all the line. So any legislation has aspects on markings. Somebody is responsible for that. Change it into each pass area rather than silos. And start batch-based documentation rather than SKU-based. And I know for some of you, you still need to start with your first. Okay, start with first. But if you are already with first, start to engage your second tier suppliers now already and not later. And I will call your trader agent zero tier. Yeah. If you are buying from a European company, then that European company is for you from retail scene is actually the same as a trading agent. It's zero tier. It's not the factory. The factory is the first tier. So somewhere along the line, there's the first tier, the one that assembles your factory. No, not your factory, their factory. There's a lot of rumor in the market, and I have make a special slide on it about omnibus. Europe is going to be relaxed on certain topics, etc., etc. Yeah, yeah, but don't wait for the deadlines because you will be too late. Yeah, and start wondering if we never made compliance decisions when we compliance-based decisions when we grew our product portfolio or added new suppliers, what would it mean when we start to do that in the next 1, 2, 3 years? Yeah, and don't avoid that question. Write it on the wall. These are the times you already bought for the next 6 to 9 months probably. So, what will actually be the consequence? And do we then still need to have certain vendors, certain products, or will we focus? Or will we actually focus on certain products and try to increase the market size to be able to justify the compliance cost? Yeah, there will be cost involved, but it's cost of doing business. Again, they need to become proactive. I suggest when you are a little bit in the skill of companies, move with us and go into flat rate and start to let them create technical files for you to review. Yeah. Then you can manage supplier performance and not products. We help suppliers to change from from not able to able, and you need to change them from not willing to willing. That's what I call commercial motivation. And together we need to look at what's called training and rewarding. Somewhere along the line, there's somebody making certain products or parts 24/7, and they should be actually able to share the information that you need in a structured way. It's not rocket science. We are able to change people to become able. Don't be fooled by European omnibus updates. Delay is not means exemption. It's going to be a lot of work and use the time well. And if they now gave you more time, then use it time well because you bloody well need it. The deadlines are still coming, and large part of the deadline is gone because your world is 6, 7, 8, 9 months ahead. Yeah. All right. We are ready for you. We don't sell compliance. We just empower you to build the confidence, and we are ready for that. If you want to become serious about product compliance, start using Product P because we are serious about product compliance. There's some questions there. When a cost number is an article imported from China, if this cost is already registered by another company, do we need to register with complete retest for the same cost too? Of course, it's larger than the limit quantities. No, but you need to be careful if you import a product and chemicals are released during the normal use of the product, which is like ink from a ballpoint, or even if you use clay to write something on the street, or you have oil, these kind of, or detergents. If you import these and there is no European m-